Hey guys, before we start, a quick shout out to Alpha Dog Nutrition for sponsoring this podcast. Alpha Dog products are now available at dusupply.com, and you can use code ALPHADOG15 at checkout for 15% off and a credit for free shipping to try it yourself. Now let's get you to your podcast.
Where's Fielder? He's gone to the dogs.
Steve Hilder here with you one more time with the Gone to the Dogs podcast. I'm here with my good friend, Corey Groover. He's the guy that is going to save this podcast from the woes of old age, viruses, heat exhaustion, all the excuses that I have for sounding like the local poster boy for the nursing home.
Oh, man.
Anyway, no, I had a talk with myself today, Corey.
What was that?
I said, man, you're playing this daggone old-timer thing too hard. You're not getting the sympathy that you thought you would get out of this.
Uh-oh.
So you need to just give it up and, you know.
I was going to say we should do weddings, Steve. We should record our podcast at weddings. You know why?
Weddings.
Weddings, yeah.
Why is that?
Because we can be something old and something new.
Well, I got the old part down.
Yeah, there
Pat.
we go.
Yeah, man, I got that part down. How you been, Corey?
I can't complain. Not yet. It's a little too hot for me. I walk outside and I start sweating bullets. But other than that, I'm doing okay.
Well, it's been kind of fun. It's been kind of a fun day for me. Here we are on the 16th of July. And we've been on a puppy watch.
Oh,
today.
Yeah.
A friend that I've corresponded with a whole lot and have not actually met him, Lucas Clemens from down along the coast of North Carolina, down by the South Carolina line, just a little north of Myrtle Beach area there. Bred a female to our fever dog, and her due date was supposed to be Friday, this coming Friday, the 18th, but she surprised us today. And I've been watching my phone here because he sent a picture and he said, Fever is a daddy. So we were kind of happy about that.
That's a good
So
text
I'm
message
glancing here at my phone as we're recording, and then I get a message, number 2 is here.
Oh, Lord.
And then right behind it, make that 3, he says. So,
well, congratulations to you and Fever. That's great.
Yeah. Mark says, great, keep them coming. So anyway, we get a little fun out of that.
How many do you think she's going to have?
It's his first time litter and his first time being bred. He had been collected. Actually, he did. We had a little accidental rendezvous out the White River with a guy with a black and tan female, but she was supposed to be long gone or not even into heat. And they did have a rendezvous out there one night, but she didn't have any pups. And I think that she probably wasn't. I think he was just more ambitious than she was ready. But anyway, this is his first litter and hers. So, I'd be happy with a half a dozen, but I don't know what Lucas wants. They're all his.
Oh, boy.
That'll be his. But I think he told me the other day he's already making plans for the 2 that he plans to keep. So I hope he gets a good litter, and I hope the little rascals, do what they're bred to do.
Now,
but anyway, so that's kind of been what I've been doing today. You're going to be doing that before long.
I hope so. Now, do you and Mark have plans to keep a pup out of Fever?
Mark says the next pup he turns out is, I asked him about that, and he said, whenever I decide or whatever, it'll be something out of Fever.
There you go.
So he and Fever are buds. Yeah, I had a conversation today with my buddy Gordy Schrader, who is a plot man to the bone and has a Bayou Banana female Grand Night, very impressive plot female that I hunted with several times, and we were talking all about that, and about whether we'd have another pup or raise a pup and what would it be out of. And he and I both about decided that, Florida's not a very good place to raise puppies or to start puppies. But anyway, we'll hopefully Mark and I'll continue to partner for a long time. I hope so. He sure has been a good partner, probably better than I've been. So
Well, that's great.
but yeah. But what's been going on? You doing any coon hunting activities there? I know you were real busy with the wags for kids and all of that, and so have you settled down a little bit?
Yeah,
I know
yeah.
you went out and treated a coon the other night with Goldie.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
Yeah, so Goldie had a little bit of a hiatus, with coming into heat and getting bred to Joe, Saddle Up Joe. So she's been in the pen for a while, and yesterday I noticed that she was getting a little yippy out there, and that's usually a sign she's ready to go hunting, So I was like, oh man, it's hot out, but I'm going to suck it up. I'm going to get my big fat butt out of bed, and I'm going to go hunting. And, she's the kind of dog that you have to keep her hunted up pretty regularly. I wouldn't say you got to hunt her 7 nights a week, but she's got to go hunting every single week in order to look her best. And so last night you could definitely tell she was rusty. She did a couple foolish things right off the bat and corrected herself, and finally she got in there deep, and the coons weren't moving, first and foremost, but she got in there deep, and she opened on a track, and I could tell just by the way she was opening it wasn't a very good track. She was having to grub it up, and she only threw 3 or 4 track barks in the span of 30 minutes, 40 minutes, and I was like, man, she's not going to put anything up here, So I started heading back towards the truck to get my alpha and everything. Lo and behold, she just fell treed like a freight train and went in there, and she had a coon. So she redeemed herself and looked pretty good doing it. And I really appreciate a young dog working an old track like that. That's some of my favorite coon hunting, when I can just sit back, I can listen to the track and let them tree for a little bit and then ease my way in there. That's some of my favorite dog training coon hunting experiences ever. So
we had a couple of coon hunting friends back in West Virginia, and they hunted blue ticks.
So they did a lot of that.
Now, guys did like the blue ticks, but they would hunt together, and they would go up in the national forest up around Marlington, West Virginia, hunting up what was called Anthony's Creek. And it's a good road, good gravel road, and you could hunt the dog off the road. And Bill Ormady was a local businessman there, operated an appliance business there in our hometown, a really classy guy. And my longtime friend and my dad's friend, Howard Meadows. Howard had been a prisoner of war in World War II, had captured by the Germans, was turned out of the prison camp at the end of the war, and just kind of had to find his way back to friendly lines. Got back home, worked in the coal mines, was in a severe coal mining accident, ended up walking with a severe limp, and I've talked about him before. I mean, it was painful to watch Howard walk, but he would walk all night with you.
Wow.
Coon hunting. He was tough. But anyway, those guys as they got a little older, they stayed in that truck a lot. And if they were telling you about their coon hunt, which to me was always, I wanted to hear from all the local coon hunters about what they did the night before. And we had a used car lot there and a coon hunter there named Cliff Talbert. And he was mentioned in a Full Cry article that was posted as a podcast here 2 or 3 weeks ago about the dog spending the night or 3 or 4 days in a cave. Well, anyway, at Cliff Talbert's car lot there, all the coon hunters would gather in around lunchtime. And now in West Virginia, and I'm going to get a lot of hate mail from this, you worked in the coal mines just long enough to get a disability so you could coon hunt all night. That's the way it worked. For most, a lot of guys, let's say that. But anyway, I'd go in there when I was had a sales job, and on my lunch hour, I'd stop in there and listen to all the stories of what the guys did the night before. But anyway, if you called Howard and talked to him or Bill Ormandy, they would describe their hunt, and if they caught a coon, they'd be glad to tell you about that. Because if you could catch one and an extreme night catch 2 in West Virginia, you were doing really, really well.
Yeah, I'd say so.
But they would talk about these blue ticks, and he'd say, well, so-and-so fell off the ridge there down in the holler and struck, and it was a T-track, they'd say. Now, a T-track meant that Bill carried a thermos bottle full of hot tea. They didn't drink coffee. He carried a thermos bottle full of hot tea, so when those blue dogs opened, they knew just to pull over and pour the tea and sit back. It was going to be a while.
Oh, yeah.
A good old T-track, So that must have been what Goldie had the other night.
Must be. Have you ever hunted with Gaskins?
I have not. No, I rode one once, but
geez.
I never.
So
No.
back in the day, up here in my part of the country, there were a lot of Gaskin hounds. I think actually they had a little breed organization. I want to say the gentleman that was the president of that for a long time was a guy by the name of John Roberts, and he was an adamant. I think they called them American Gaskins, American Gaskin hounds.
American Blue Gascon.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I got to hunt with. It wasn't John, but I got to hunt with one of those Gaskins one time. And boy, you want to talk about slow and steady. Those Gaskin hounds, they took the cake.
They were big dogs.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Big, and they were blue tick in color. And I think were probably used now. Some of the guys out west can set me straight on this, but there was a breed that started out in the west called the Majestic Tree Hound, and they were big, houndy dogs. I probably had some of that Gascon, influence in their breeding. I do know that, I'm not even going to tell that story because it's not worth it. But I have hunted with some of those type dogs, It's just another one of those coon hunting stories, and I got a million.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Well, Corey, this old raspy voice probably won't hold up for much of it. It's kind of we've got that. I don't know if they've been talking about it on the news up your way and all this Saharan sand or whatever, this stuff that's blowing over from the Sahara Desert over in Africa or whatever.
No.
We've been having very poor air quality in Florida.
Uh-oh.
We have a lot of pollen down here anyway,
right?
And it's just wreaking havoc with me. But I wanted to talk tonight, or today, as the case may be, a little bit on a subject that, if you read the title before you clicked on the arrow to listen to this podcast, called Gone to the Dogs, The Elephant in the Room. And I wanted to talk a little bit about a subject that's usually taboo when on the media, in the magazines. It certainly isn't at the clubhouse tables and when guys get together and all. But I'm going to tell you a little story to begin this session, and then we'll just see where the discussion goes. And I think I gave you a little warning so you're not totally taken by surprise.
Well, I appreciate that.
Totally blindsided you. This is one of those podcasts that we're going to record and we'll decide when it's all over whether we're going to drop it.
Sometimes Steve likes to plan thoroughly what we're going to talk about, and other times he just likes to see what kind of reaction he can get out of me. So here we go.
Well, that's right. You're a good sounding board, Corey. Absolutely. But no, let me tell you, we'll start the subject this way. For a long time, I've been trying to get a young man to jump into the night hunt game because he's got a really nice dog, and I think that he would really enjoy it. And he's the kind of guy that gets along with everybody, never wants to make any waves, enjoyable to hunt with, absolutely dedicated to the sport of coon hunting, his personal, on a personal basis, because he's out there virtually every night. People who have listened to me or watched my post on Facebook probably know who I'm talking about, and I'm sure you do too, Corey. But he surprised me here about a week ago. He said, "I'm going to go to a night hunt." And I said, "No, you're not." And he said, "Yeah, I am. I've decided that I'm going to go." And I said, "Well, that's great. I'm really glad to hear that, man, because I know he's going to enjoy it because he's going to win a lot.
Sure.
With that dog. But he's the kind of guy, he likes to meet people, and he, and enjoys the stories, and always thinking of the other guy, really.
Sure.
And without, giving you the moral of this story right up front, there's a reason I want to tell his story, because it impacts our sport in such a profound way. And that's why I want to touch on this subject. But I'm going to tell the story first before I reveal the subject. He went to this night hunt at a club that's not very far from him. And when he got there, there weren't a lot of dogs entered. But his cast consisted of an older gentleman hunting a blue tick, a middle-aged fella hunting a red tick, or an English dog, and a young hunter, a kid, he described him. And I believe the kid had a friend about his age that was along with him. So the four of them go to the woods. Without boring you with a big, long story, the first track that they got, my friend, the subject of the story, ended up with third strike. The two dogs were declared treed before his dog was struck. So the judge rightly told him, when he struck his dog, and then he did I don't know how much time expired, but he did tree his dog deeper in, and it was obvious that he was on a separate tree.
Okay.
The guy that was carrying the card said, "I'm going to put a line under your strike points because we were already treed before you struck your dog." Perfect. Okay. They go to the tree, and after considerable shining, they say, "Well, you go ahead and go to your dog," they said to my friend. "And we've got 3 hunters here. We'll score this tree, and then we'll come to you." Well, actually, what he did is he went to his dog and tied his dog and came back to the tree.
Sure.
Okay. And no coon was seen on this tree. They go to my friend's dog, and right away as they walk up, they see a coon on a lower limb. They plus his tree points only. He asks about his strike points. "Don't I get those too?" "No, you were struck with a line. Therefore, you do not get those strike points." Okay. All right. So then they go on and the hunt progresses, and I think one of the kids' dogs gets treed. He doesn't want to tree the dog. The dog sits there for a while. They run the stationary rule on the dog. He finally treats the dog, and I believe the dog had a coon. The next drop they make, somehow the dogs get together across a river, a creek. The guy that is carrying the card says, "I don't want to try to cross this creek with these kids. Let's just, you and me," he tells my friend, "withdraw our dogs, and that will make the kid the winner. And if you will, I'll stay here with the kids and you go get the dogs."
Oh, geez.
He does. He goes and he gets the dogs and he brings them back across, and they're hollering at him from across the river, "We see the coon. We see the coon." Anyway, when they get back, he gets back across. My friend immediately congratulates the kid and said, "Buddy, you're the winner. How's that feel? That's great." The guy that is carrying the card, I did fail to tell you that the older gentleman's dog was scratched, apparently, for aggression.
Okay.
At some point, the blue tick. So the red tick dog, or the English dog, let's put it that way, it's still in the cast, the kid's dog and my friend's dog, and they had agreed that they were going to withdraw and the kid was going to be the winner, yada, 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 which is not policy, but that's what the guy told him that they should do. So when he gets back and congratulates the kid, the guy goes, "Well, he didn't win. I won the cast." And my friend's like, "Wait a minute. We agreed to withdraw so the kid can win." "Well, yeah, and we took a vote on that first tree up there, and we decided to plus that too." Now we're laughing, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're laughing about. So by then, my friend's saying, "Well, you guys have a great time.
Oh,
I'm going to go to the house."
geez.
Now, thankfully, from his attitude that I experienced in our conversation, it didn't sour him. He said, "Next time I go back, I'm going to have some guys with me that really know the rules and are not going to let this kind of stuff happen to me." He said, "I knew it wasn't right, but I did not want to argue."
Mm-hmm.
And the kid, he didn't know. He didn't even know enough to tree his dog,
Right.
with the stationary running. So anyway, the elephant in the room that I want to talk about tonight is cheating within the realm of coon hunting. Do you believe it exists out there, Corey?
Oh, yeah.
I know that we all do, no matter how long we've hunted. We've either heard the stories, some of them true, some of them not, or we've experienced it ourselves. And we don't like to admit it, that it goes on in our sport. From a registry standpoint, you and I both have had positions that basically required us to put a positive spin on the sport, put a positive face on it to encourage people to participate. And that's what I want to do. And that's the reason that I'm doing this in this podcast, is not to discourage anybody but making people aware and hopefully making some people ashamed of themselves and expose the ends that some people will go to win at our game. And there's a lot of different ways that, they can circumvent the rules.
Mm-hmm. Well, if I can campaign for some pity for us, having the level of experience that we do professionally and unprofessionally in the sport, obviously Steve and I, we've had our own experiences with this in the field, competing, being a competitor. But at the same time, we have been behind the veil, that shields the Wizard of Oz, so to speak. And we've seen what all these Oompa Loompas are doing in the background. And it's a lot of stuff we never wanted to know about. So I would say that Steve, like myself, we've seen, heard, and dealt with a lot of situations that we never dreamt was possible. We never wanted to be a part of, and that's so have pity on us when we talk about this kind of stuff.
That's right. That's right. That's why I have nightmares at times.
Flashbacks.
But, the subject of cheating in night hunts is grossly overstated.
Correct.
By some. And most people that go to a night hunt and come home and say, I got cheated, is simply because they didn't know the rules. They didn't know what their rights were. And my buddy would gladly tell you that he falls under that category.
Sure.
He fundamentally does, but he doesn't know all the nuances of night hunting, at this point. But he wants to learn.
Right.
And that's the reason that I'm doing it. This is not an attempt to try to justify why my friend didn't win. It's simply to expose some of the things that are happening out there to first-time or young hunters or new hunters or even those that are the older ones. I have had be standing with a non-hunting judge under my dog's tree and all the cast members, the judge and myself, watching a coon crawl out a limb and a competitor saying, I don't see a coon. I do not see a coon.
Yeah. There's
no coon there.
Well, the story's a good segue into the conversation because, like you said, it's a difficult conversation to have from an intellectual perspective because, you don't want to name names and you don't want to seem demeaning or anything like that when you have the conversations. But, I think it's important for people to realize that it does go on. Maybe we can help people identify, certain scenarios to stay away from. And hopefully that our whole discussion is constructive in that way. I would hope so.
Yeah. Well, we want this to be a learning experience for people.
Sure.
And first and foremost, that you can't preach this enough. Know the rules before you go.
Duh,
Know
rules. Yeah. No.
the rules, THE rules. Know them. And this is not only in coon hunting, NASCAR. Why do they make them tear down the winning car after every race? We remember Deflategate with Tom Brady, and the Patriots. We remember Lance Armstrong with the performance enhancing drugs and so forth. You hear the stories about guys dropping lead sinkers in the bass's mouth to make him weigh more at the weigh-in. Any time there is a sporting contest, there's an opportunity. They even caught my beloved Houston Astros stealing signals. Can you imagine that? By thumping on a trash can. I mean, there's just all kinds of temptations out there for people to circumvent the rules and to, win at all costs.
Yeah. And to be fair, there are plenty of ways that people can do this and stay completely within the realm of the rules.
Oh, well, there's, that was always down through the years. The good handlers, the really good ones know how to use the rules to their advantage, Well, that's where everybody else needs. It's like the old thing, the example I remember, the guys saying, treeing his dog in there real deep on me when I'm judging and I'm not hearing the dog. And he said, oh, yeah, he's treed. I give me, tree me for 125. And I said, well, yeah, I can hear him too. And I can tell he just moved to the right about 100 yards. So I'm going to minus that tree. When in fact, there was no dog barking, Now, I say that in jest,
Sure.
But, those kind of things do pop up from time to time. But I thought it would be interesting. Sometimes it'll be humorous. Sometimes it might bring a tear to your eye. That the kind of cheating that has been done in our sport. And I imagine since we're dealing with people, it will continue to go on to some degree. Because as you and I discussed, Corey, there's no way for a registry to police everything that goes on out there in the dark.
Yeah, I agree with that.
We send 4 hunters out the door into the dark of night and ask them to be sportsmen, to be honest. If you read a UKC scorecard, or it used to say that, or on the papers, it says that, honor to whom honors due.
Yep.
The night hunt rules used to say night hunt honor rules. Maybe they still do. The system from its very inception had to be an honor system in order for it to work, because there simply wasn't enough. There was no way to police it adequately.
Sure.
Outside of each hunter looking after the other.
Well, and it's an interesting topic that we choose to talk about in this day and age, because we live in a culture now that is obsessed with justice and being politically correct. And we try to police everything, and it's just simply not possible. And all of this policing is a vagrant attempt to replace a moral compass that used to exist in all of us and a greater portion of the country. And without that moral compass, when you're out in the dark, competing in something like a competition coon hunt, you can expect things to go awry, and you can expect that people are going to argue and they're going to be, frustrated, and that's pretty commonplace if you don't bring morality into the equation. And I actually used to have I had a science teacher when I was growing up, and he put this in a really a really good light for me, no pun intended. But his name was Chris Blatt, and he hunted red bones, and we hunted together quite a bit because we both had red bones. And Chris was always interested in trying a competition hunt out, but he never, he would always talk himself out of it. Well, finally, we made a trip out to National Redbone Days one year, and they had a youth hunt. And he had brought 2 of his kids with him, and he had a dog for each of them to hunt. And he's like, well, I'll just, we'll put them in this youth hunt and see how it goes. And unfortunately, he one of his kids got cheated that night, by the judge who had a kid in the competition, and it was a pretty well-named, big name person in the breed at the time. And he kind of came back shaking his head, and he said, he's like, I can see why people complain about the cheating that goes on at these events now, because, and he's like, and I can understand it now because anything can happen out there in the dark.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, you got it. Yeah. That's a fair point that you make there,
Well, I thought it would be kind of funny, not funny, but interesting. I guess where I came from, we used that word funny when we didn't really mean humorous. We meant it's kind of strange.
Suspicious, yeah.
Or suspicious, The different types of cheating that goes on or has gone on, and hats off to the registries and to the rules committees and so forth down through the years that have tried to put safeguards into the rules that would prevent these kinds of things from happening. But you laughed at me earlier when I talked about pencil crooks. And
I'd never heard that before.
That is, well, you've got the stuff that's on the bottom of the ocean, on the very bottom.
Whale
dung. That's the level of the pencil crook.
Oh,
okay.
Yeah.
That's where he swims.
Ooh.
That's where he feeds and all, because he's the guy that simply goes out and fills out the scorecard. Now, this used to be a problem years ago because the rules were set in such a way to award a night champion title. Dogs could place within the cast. In other words, you've got a cast of dogs out there that one scores 500 and one 4 and one 3 and one 2. Well, if that was a 4-dog hunt, then the one with 500 would get first place in the hunt. The next one would get second, and the next third, and the next fourth. And each one bore so many points toward night champion.
Mm-hmm.
And when you got that magical 100 points awarded, your dog was a night champion. So, guys would walk out of the clubhouse and say, well, what do you need, Corey, to finish your dog? Well, I just need a 3rd place. Well, okay, you got
That's
it.
actually how That's actually how NSD does their hunts right now, I think. In their squirrel and coon programs. Wow. They actually place all the dogs in the cast, yeah.
Oh, wow. Well, that I'm not saying they're doing that at all, but that opens the door for that kind of activity.
Sure.
If you get birds of a feather flock together sometimes. And if you get a group of guys like that, okay. So that's, to me, that's the lowest level. The guy that just walks out there and says, okay, we're going to go to the bar and have a couple cold ones and we'll fill this card out. We'll stick it out in the rain and make it look wet and muddy and we'll bring it back in. That's, just the most blatant kind of cheating.
Yeah, outright lying.
And usually, just like in crimes, somebody will go to the bar and brag about it at some point along, and the registry will find out about it. And they'll hold an investigation, and they'll call the cast members, and one of them will spill the beans and sometimes, not always. I don't think that happens very often anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, I'm an old guy, old school, but it used to.
Yeah.
With fair regularity. I've seen it personally, witnessed that 3 times when I was at a hunt hunting.
Wow.
And many times in my many years with the registries. Don't be a pencil crook.
Yeah.
The atmosphere is real bad down there. Another way that I think is just about as petty, just about as low, is the guy that only votes to help his dog on a night hunt cast.
Mm-hmm.
He's the guy that never sees anybody else's coon. He doesn't shine the tree unless he's absolutely shamed into doing it. If he doesn't have first tree on it, if me finding your coon, Corey's going to let you win the casting, and I'm sitting here looking at it, I'm not going to tell you that. That's cheating.
Oh, yeah.
Because the judging system is set up where the majority has to see the coon.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So if you say you don't see it when you do, you're a crook.
Mm-hmm.
Not to mention a liar.
Well, and I think
Yeah.
that this is something that is becoming a little bit more common nowadays, and maybe not to the severity of getting to a point where you're not seeing scoreable coons that are actually there. But I notice a lot of younger hunters that may only have 1 or 2 dogs that they're competing with, and those dogs, they're very proud of those dogs, and they're the only dogs on the place, so they're the ones that they're hunting 24/7, 7 days a week. They kind of become blinded to the other dogs in the cast, and it's hard for them to see the dynamics of the hunt. And it's just because they're so used to focusing independently on their own dog. And I don't think that adheres to what's written in the honor rules. And speaking of a moral perspective on the matter, you have to be fair, and you got to be fair to everybody's dog. Even if you're not judging a cast, you have to be fair, and you have to say it how it is.
Well, that's it. And, the philosophy of the late Roy Tramble with PKC was, if the dog deserves the credit, let's give the credit to the dog.
Yeah. And the only reason I say that it's becoming more common is because I don't think that that as a society of coon hunters, that we keep as many dogs as what people did in the past. It wasn't uncommon for someone to have 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 coon dogs tied up out back. I think nowadays most competition hunters are going to have 1 or 2, and obviously they kind of become more bonded to those dogs to a certain degree, and it's kind of like a loyalty factor. They're extremely loyal to their dog. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Well, that's true. They are, and the object, becomes, it's my dog. I'm going to do everything that I can do to help my dog win. Well, that's fine. That's admirable, as long as you do it within the confines of the rules.
Yeah, correct.
I've always been a rules guy, okay? and I chaired all those rules committees for so many years. I was on the breed representative for my breed association. I was president of the Plaza Association. I saw many, many cases where I had to make decisions of whether somebody did or did not obey the rules. I've always been a stickler for rules. Maybe that comes from the fact that I spent so many grueling hours, with committees and so forth, developing those rules. And for what? For somebody to go out there and use them, for
ill-gotten gains.
Yeah. So, I'm always a rule guy, and I'm going to go with what the rule says. much as I possibly can. I want to interject here, and I will periodically as we continue to talk about this subject. The reason that we're talking about this subject here is we want to encourage as many hunters as we can to come into our sport and to enjoy the sport. What we do not want to do is teach those kids and those young hunters that they've got to do these kind of things in order to be winners. That if they've got a good dog and do it within the rules, they will have a ball in this sport. They'll really enjoy it. It's a great game. It's been designed to be fun. It's designed to be competitive, and it's designed to be rewarding. And if you do it the right way with no regrets, you're going to enjoy the trip so much better. But at the same time, I had this conversation today with a friend of mine on the phone talking about clubs in our area and other areas that just simply aren't welcoming clubs. You go into the club, you don't feel welcome there. You don't feel any affection for the other members, nor they for you. You're not greeted. You're not sometimes even acknowledged.
Mm-hmm.
I've gone to clubs here in Florida and be sitting, at a table or whatever. People come and go, and they go over and 2 or 3 over in this corner, and 2 and 3 in that corner, somebody else over there, and maybe not ever acknowledge anybody else that's there, except their 1 or 2 maybe close friends.
Yeah.
And there's no sense of camaraderie whatsoever. So all these things combine to discourage younger or new hunters from coming into our sport, which is just the opposite of what we need to be doing.
Yeah, and I think there's kind of a grander concept there. When you talk about clubs that are kind of cold and shut off to the newcomer. Personally, I believe that we have too many clubs, and I think that we have too many events, and that transcends the boundaries of UKC, PKC, any registry that you want to talk about. We just have too many events, and we have too many clubs, and all it does is it subdivides, and what used to be a thriving community of coon hunters is now segmented down into 3 or 4 clubs. And you get the right guys that are born and bred with the right attitudes in a building together, and there's not going to be much conversation going on. There's not going to be much encouragement flowing around, and that's the danger of promoting a club in the saturated environment that we have right now with coonhound clubs throughout the country. I remember when I worked at United Kennel Club. We didn't even have the ability to approve new clubs in the state of Indiana because there was just no feasible way that we could approve the club and get them dates to hold events on. And I think when we get to that point, I think that's a pretty good indication that we have too many. And usually, I'm not saying that you can't have larger groups or larger clubs that aren't inviting or discourage newcomers, but it's a lot less likely. Let's put it that way.
Points well taken. Well, back in the day, and as someone once said about a coon hunter, they talked about this individual who has done a lot of winning, had quite a resume with winning, and the subject was whether it should kill every coon that a dog treed, and this individual said that he believed that you should, and they said, well, why would you want to do that? And he said, well, if you don't like my method, just beat my record, So, and so there's that thought. But I grew up through the Fred Miller regime of UKC, and Fred was a businessman and a good businessman. But he looked at the sport of coon hunting from the standpoint of taking care of it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, of course, he was interested in the bottom line. Certainly he was. But if, like that coon hunter said, if you don't like his methods, you know, beat his record.
Mm-hmm.
He owned UKC when it was absolutely at its peak,
Right.
when it was getting more registrations than you and I would probably believe, when the events were cram packed, you know, to overflowing. And when the World Hunt and the Purina Race and all these things were growing by leaps and bounds, and the magazine was going from 3,000 subscribers to almost 30,000,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and all these things. But he knew how to take care of the business. And one of the things, to your point, is that we kept a tight rein on the distances between clubs.
Right.
You know, and we did have to say no,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and we did have to say when a club called in and said, well, this has always been our date. Well, with the calendar switch, you come a week earlier this year,
Yeah.
you know, with leap year and all that stuff. Oh no, this isn't. No,
Well,
the
and
rule is, you know,
and it's kind of this. It's kind of the same train of thought with breed organizations. You know, I don't know that two identical breed organizations or two identical or clubs in the same vicinity with each other ever started, you know, completely coincidentally from one another. You know, usually there's some bad blood there, or so, you know, somebody gets
yeah.
mad and they want to go play in their own sandbox kind of deal. And I hate to say that, but it's the truth in a lot of cases, and not all cases, but a majority of them. Yeah.
Well, and there again, you know, with this, our goals are noble.
Yeah.
What we're accomplishing here may not be.
You never know.
But, you know, going ahead and just looking at some of these things, and you may chuckle, and you guys out there, and some of them your head bobbing and say, yeah, that happened to me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, people that switch dogs in an event. This was the things I used to get into. Of course, DNA profiling has done a lot to help identify dogs in a way that we did not have in years gone by.
Yeah.
And I may have mentioned this, you know, basically what I'm talking about is someone hunting let's say he's got a Grand Night Champion that's a really nice dog. Let's say say it's a red bone. All red bones are red, right?
Oh.
They all look alike. They look alike.
You're ripping
you
off
know?
scabs, Steve.
And so we got Great Dog Junior here. It's not as great as his dad, but we want to make a grand night out of him too. So you're a little tempted, you know, to go hunt the old man on the young dog's papers. Nobody's going to know the difference, especially if we slide over here to a club, you know, off the beaten path somewhere. You know, who'd be the wiser? There's a red dog, right?
Oh yeah.
You know, so that sort of thing did happen. Again, every night, no. Occasionally, yes. And we caught several of those.
Yeah.
And but DNA sure made that easier, you know.
Right.
And all. So you got that kind of thing. And then we had these instances of people catching dogs out of the woods to keep them from competing.
Right.
And these kind of things came up and you know, and were dealt with and so forth. And I remember one night at a hunt when I was with PKC, I told my boss, Larry Meeks, God rest his soul, that, you know, I'd never been on a stakeout in a night hunt. We were out hiding in the woods in a van.
Down by the river?
Trying to catch. Yeah, trying to catch what we had tip, you know, had
Sure.
given us that somebody was going to be in the woods trying to catch some of the competing dogs,
Oh boy.
take them out of the competition. So anyway, so those kind of things have happened under the guise of these honor rules.
Yeah, and maybe we can elaborate on that. Why would something like that take place? Let's go back to hunting one dog as another dog. What do you gain from that? Well, there's a lot of different aspects of the coon hunting world that play into the night hunting game. So because Junior becomes a Grand Night champion, then we can advertise him at stud. Maybe we can advertise him as having an all Grand pedigree, and maybe that's the drive to finish him the Grand Night champion. But the reality and the drive don't match. There's often times when show dogs are often, or I should say, hunting dogs are often swapped out for show dogs in a hunt, just to put a hunting title on the dog so they can compete in special classes and bench shows. That's something that's happened in the past. And
I'm sure.
Yeah,
I'm sure.
So there's a variety of different reasons. There's the current reproducers list with UKC, or any registry that keeps track of the earnings of sires puppies or dams puppies or whatever. The implications that doing something like that can have on the integrity of the registry is monumental. So even if it doesn't seem like it's that bad, it really is putting a black eye on the sport when you allow that to happen.
Absolutely, and that's why the registries, exist, and that's why they are. That's one of the reasons that they're able to exist, is because of the integrity of their records. A registry is a records business, whether it's the parentage of the dog or the accomplishments of the dog in competition or whatever. It's a recorded record and proof that this dog did thus and so. And so it's very important to preserve that, and that's why the registries have always taken, a hard line when it comes to dealing with cheaters. But one thing that's always confused me is there is a very forgiving attitude among most coon hunters when it comes to individuals that do these types of behaviors or perform these kinds of acts. And I think it goes deeper than just being, I don't want to be a snitch, so I'm not going to tell on this guy for doing what he did. But it's your sport. It's your sport that's eroding because of the fact, in many cases, that you don't stand up and say, I witnessed this. I know this is what happened.
I think what you're alluding to is empathy. Honestly, I think it is, because I think, as honest as some of us portray ourselves to be, I think we all have had at least one situation where our moral compass was spinning, or our integrity was called into question. And I think that when we have those kinds of conversations with people, subconsciously we just think back to that, and it's like, I wouldn't want to be chastised for what, if it was known what I did, and this isn't really any better than what he did. So
when you use that word empathy, it reminded me of another similar word that you said. They asked a coon hunter one time if he thought ignorance and apathy were the main causes of the demise of our sport. And he said, I don't know, and I don't care.
Oh, that's
so. Yeah, exactly, Corey. And, DNA, we mentioned that earlier, back when the futurity programs came along, and I think PKC certainly was the forerunner of that. I keep hitting my my Apple Watch, and it's talking back to me here. Anyway, these futurities and the super stakes and of course now we the different pup programs depended on the dog's age. And then later on, when they grew, they had to be split up in two different parts of the year in 6 months increments. So it was important that there was a way to determine the dog's age. And in the early days, there was not.
Mm-hmm.
So it would be common for an older dog, to be placed in a litter that was registered. He would have an earlier or a later birth date. Maybe he was 3 years old and he was in a litter of 1-year-olds, according to his registration. Dogs being singled in and so forth. Anyway, paper crooks, people that play with the records. That was one thing that the UKC always took very, very seriously when I was there. Again, during the Fred Miller regime, Fred was very, very, very particular about that, and would go to all ends to prosecute someone that was caught, playing with the paper. And because, again, his business was records. Yeah. And people paid for those records, but they wouldn't pay for them if the information was not accurate.
Yeah, I think that that's probably the most egregious thing. You were talking about how did you phrase that? Pencil pushers or pencil crooks?
Pencil crooks.
Yeah. Well, in my opinion, anybody that's falsifying records on a dog is pretty low. And the reason I say that is because there are so many people that rely on the records that they're given and the records that they believe to be true to make important decisions in breeding programs and in competitive venues, all kinds of things. And if we can't trust what's written on paper in front of us, then our dogs are going to suffer for it in the long run. And that could be in performance, that could be in health. And we don't ever want to get to that point with the dogs that we love so dearly that we can't trust the records we're given. And if you are out there or you're thinking about falsifying records, just let me tell you right now, it is not worth it, because Steve and I will drive to your house and we will beat you senselessly. At least I will.
You heard it here. A threat.
It was a promise. A
promise. Yes. Okay. Well, guys, we can beat this dead horse to death. And there's so many different things that I thought about talking about. Bribery has entered in. I told Corey a story earlier about a well-known individual that had a handler that chose to bribe a judge, and the judge played along and took the money, and wisely, as soon as he got back to the club, he laid the money and the scorecard down in front of the master hounds and spilled the beans, which resulted in people being barred from participation, which is really the only recourse that the registry has. Is to just take you out of the competition. If you don't want to play by the rules, you don't respect your fellow man. And that's another thing that we haven't really talked about here. But it would be, if I was preaching a sermon, it'd probably be the first of the 3 points in the poem of my sermon would be, respect your fellow human beings.
That's correct.
That is so much in short supply nowadays in our world. Mm-hmm. Respect. Aretha Franklin had a great song, R-E-S-P-E-C-T. It's a great word. It carries a lot of meaning. If you don't respect somebody, and treat them the way you would want to be treated. What happened to that, guys?
Yeah.
What happened to that?
And newsflash, newsflash for everyone out there, you can still respect someone and still beat them.
Competition, hey, I love it.
Mhm.
It's a game.
Right.
You go to win. If you don't go to win, well, stay at the house.
Right.
But for gosh sakes, don't be a pencil crook.
Mhm.
Don't be a bottom feeder.
Right.
Don't be a sleazeball. Don't be the guy that, when you walk in the clubhouse, everybody starts buzzing over here because they know, there's been so many blatant, another one, and everybody, I'm not going to mention names, but everybody in the country knows who the chief proponent of this egregious crime was, the fake coon eyes era, where guys would take a short piece of like rebar or metal, maybe 1/8 of an inch in diameter, 1 inch long, 1.5 inches long, wrap reflector tape around one end of it, tie a piece of chalk line onto it, and then put another piece of metal on the other end, throw it or shoot it in a slingshot up into the tree, into a leafy tree, and watch it, that as it swung around, it's moving. It looks like a coon blinking at you.
Mm-hmm.
It does. I mean, of course, the thermal imaging scopes, I guess, would be pretty hard.
Now,
on
Steve,
that.
I remind the viewers of this a lot, but you're older than me, so you're going to know the answer to
A
this
little
question.
bit.
Just a little bit.
A little bit.
Slingshots and fake coon eyes that was a little bit before my time. So here's what I want to know. I want to know how you could go into a cast, draw out at the club, and drive to the woods and get away with having a slingshot on your person. Nobody ever thought to question that. That's almost like that. Not to be controversial, but that's almost like a gunman getting on the roof and taking a pop at the president or the previous president. Like, how does that happen? And if I saw a guy walking around with a slingshot, I'd ask questions.
Well, you wouldn't see him, certainly.
Sure.
You wouldn't see the slingshot. And when you're at a tree and the time is running and everybody's walking around looking up that tree, squalling and shining, they're not paying attention to what the other hunters are doing.
Sure.
They're not looking at their fellow hunters. And then so, swang, here it goes. Everybody, I got him.
Oh, boy.
And they come over, plus him up,
See,
winking, blinking, and nod.
I would think if I was 10, 15 years younger, that would be one of those stories that I would be like, yeah, Grandpa, you tell funny stories, that didn't happen.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to give anybody any ideas because if you get caught with them, you're going to any of these things that we're recalling. Our guys learned their lesson, not to do those stupid things anymore.
We don't want this to go viral. That's what we don't want.
So every kid now is going to be out in the garage.
Slingshot sales are going up.
No, but okay. And then, it boils right on down to today. The use of electronic devices is abused. There's no question about it. It's abused. Even if you do them, what is supposedly kosher and all, you're still, creating an unfair advantage with these devices. We know they're great for keeping our dogs safe and all of those things. And man, I got one of these new Garmin LTE units.
Ooh.
And I'm going to sit down here, kick back with my feet up, and watch Mark go sweating up and down
that brings up a good point. there's definitely a wage gap here because he can afford to go out and buy these new electronics that come out, but I'm not getting paid enough to go out and pick these up from the podcast. So you must be making quite a bit more than me. That's what I'm guessing. You don't have to tell me,
Well,
but I'm just gonna
well,
guess.
nothing from nothing. How much is it? How much is that? Well, we'll put you in for a raise, Corey. How's 30%?
Okay, yeah, we can talk about it later offline, But Steve, I don't think it's fair for us to talk about all of the cheating that has taken place and does go on in the sport without telling on ourselves a little bit. So I'm going to volunteer
Hmm.
and I'm going to tell a story about from a cast that when I was very young. So we're talking at least 15 years ago. Okay, I think that what do they call that? Statute of limitations is in effect
Yeah,
now. Okay,
it's
so
probably
I
up
don't think I'll
on
get in
it.
trouble for this.
But I'm going to make notes just in
Okay,
case I need something later on.
yeah. So as a young man growing up in the sport, I kind of got thrusted into being a judge and being a guide at a young age, and supporting the club and my local club in that respect. So I took judging very seriously because number one, I had to learn a lot, but number two, um, there was a little bit of a sense of pride in it, being as young as I was in judging a cast. Especially when seeing young hunters at an event was kind of not strange, but it wasn't common. So I remember back in the day, I thought one of the worst things my dogs could do was tree a possum. I thought, I used to be in that camp where if they treat a possum, it was going to be a rough going for them for a little while. And I was on a night champion cast one night, and my dog had gotten split treed, and he had split treed down along the side of this old beaver swamp that we were hunting in. And we had a situation where we had two dogs treed left-handed, and mine had gone right-handed towards the swamp. And the guys in my cast, they let me go down there and handle my dog. He'd been treed there for a little bit, but he didn't sound right, so I was kind of just letting him sit. Well, so I go beat bopping down there through the woods by myself, and I get down to the edge of the water, and here the sucker had killed a possum. And it was just laying on the ground, stone cold dead. And he was just sitting there barking every breath at it. Not doing anything, but sitting there barking at it. And I just sat there and I thought to myself, I cannot let these guys see that my dog treated a possum because I don't want to get scratched. And I took that possum by the tail and I whirled him around the top of my head and I threw him as deep into that beaver swamp as I could. And I tied my dog up. And I took my minus because I just tied him to any old tree that was down there. And I was like, better for him to be slick than to tree a possum. And so I took my minus and we moved on. And I've never told that story until today. And I think that's only fair considering we're talking about all the ins and outs of our experiences with cheating and different things that go on. I think a lot of people know that I have a lot of integrity in the sport, and I take what I do very seriously in any capacity. And, it's easy to get to, especially when you're out there in the dark, it's easy to take advantage of it. And, sometimes this was a cute little story and it didn't really make a difference in anything, and I kind of got to save face that my dog hadn't caught a possum on the ground and killed it. But at the same time, you can justify anything in your own mind. And that's what we really want to drive home to all of our listeners, especially our younger hunters out there, is the more and more that you justify things by your own standards, the deeper and deeper you're going to get into the realm of cheating and doing some of these bigger things that we're talking about. I think you're on mute, Steve. I'm going to get you a big old...
Well, that was such a long story. I took a little nap there.
You told me that was a long... Okay, I don't believe that because you're the king of long stories.
No. The fact that you remember that story
That should tell you a lot. Right
and
there.
the fact that you tell that story in this venue, having not told it to anyone else,
Mm-hmm.
speaks volumes to me about your character, because you knew that that was the wrong thing to do, and you remembered it, and it bothered you.
Yep.
Okay,
Still
guys,
bothers
if you're
me.
out there, if you guys are out there doing these types of things, and I'm definitely going to confess that I've been tempted to do things that I didn't actually do, but I was absolutely tempted. One night I was tempted to move my dog
Mm-hmm.
because I was sent to him on a split tree, and the other 3 cast members were shining a tree, and mine was treed deeper in, probably 150 yards or so deeper in. And when I got to him, it was on a small oak. And I thought, oh, brother, this is not going to take long to shine. And there was a real big oak right over here, a few steps.
Right.
And I was tempted just to slide him over there. Nobody would have ever been any wiser.
Sure.
I didn't. I'm glad I didn't.
Right.
And it really turned out for me because he had a coon up that little oak. As the guys walked in, they said, "We got your coon fielder. He's right here."
Well,
But
and that's a great point you bring up, Steve, and it kind of plays into my story too. For the last decade or so, we've kind of been promoting a deep and lonely type dog. A dog gets off by itself, gets treed, has a coon kind of deal. And that may have been an advantage at one point in time. Whether or not it is now, I don't know. But it brings up a good point that there should never be a point in time on a cast where you're by yourself, unless you're walking back to the
well,
truck.
you would agree with PKC with their leash lock law, where you have to go to all the trees.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because those temptations come, and it's not a sin. This is not church, folks. It is not a sin to be tempted.
Right.
Jesus Christ was tempted.
Correct.
It's yielding to the temptation that becomes the sin. So, again, it's an honor system. And to get back to our story at the first of the podcast, and I think we probably have belabored this subject enough. We're into it about an hour and 17 minutes now already. The person that had the opportunity to introduce a new hunter into the sport and to be an example to a very young hunter in the cast, chose instead that cast win for himself. He not only told the kid a lie and backed up on it and did not do what he said he would do when he said, the kid will win the cast and I'll withdraw if you withdraw. He also lied when he said he would plus a tree that was no coon was seen by anybody on the cast.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe not as egregious, but either by ignorance or design, chose not to give my friend the strike points that he had coming to him. Mm-hmm. I hope that person is listening to this podcast, and I hope you're sleeping really well. But in my opinion, sir, and if I, knew your name and I had your phone number, I would call you and tell you this personally. You are what's wrong You are the poster boy for everything that's wrong in this sport. This is a great sport. It's a great gateway for young hunters to get into all the wide world of the outdoors, whether they choose deer hunting. Maybe when they get a good job, when they get older, they can go to Wyoming and hunt elk, or Alaska and hunt brown bear, or whatever, But they could be discouraged to the point where they just retire to the video game set and say, this hunting thing is not worth it because of the people that are involved in this hunt that are supposed to be the mentors and the leaders are crooks.
Mm-hmm. And that's a good point, Steve. I mean, we need to, if we want, I know that there's a lot of people that talk about cheating and whether or not cheating exists to the capacity of the stories we're told. I don't know that for sure. And I don't necessarily.
I don't either. I hope two things. Number one, I don't think that it is. And number two, I certainly hope that it's not.
Well, that being said, we need to be the difference that we want to see in the sport. And if we're worried about others taking advantage of people who don't know any better or taking advantage of a written set of rules, our absence isn't doing anything to stop that. We need to be the people that are out there that are standing up for those who don't know any better, or educating those who don't know any better. And, if we can be that example for people, then you're going to see that even if it is a problem in your area, it's going to diminish greatly just by your presence. So I would encourage anybody that wants to give this a try, go out there and be the best that you can be, but don't feed into your own ego.
Good point. And going forward, we'll try to give you as much useful information as we can on this podcast to prepare you for the hunts so that you and your dog can get, that honor that you have coming to you, that you're due, and that you'll have a great time, because I've had a wonderful life in this sport, enjoyed it so much, still do. I would be out there competition hunting at every opportunity if I had the legs for it anymore. But if you do, get out there, be a force for good, be honest, respect your fellow man. You'll have a great time. But you got to learn those rules.
And as a little treat for those of you who are listening, hunt a plot hound. That's all I'm going to say.
As my good buddy John Sturgill in the hills of West Virginia, one of the best coon hunters I know, said, if you want a coon in the pot, hunt a plot.
There you go.
Folks, it's been a good visit with you. We've laughed. We've probably scolded, and we may have even offended a few. And if we did, that's good. I'm glad. Because I don't think, unless you're guilty, you would have been offended by anything that we said tonight. But anyway, thanks for listening to the Gone to the Dogs podcast. We want to thank our good friends, Buddy Woodbury, Jason Doobie at W Hunting Supply, for making this podcast possible. We want to thank Alpha Dog Nutrition for being aboard as a sponsor. And we just urge you to get out to a hunt somewhere, get that dog prepared, get yourself prepared, and have fun. I mean, it is a blast.
It really is.
Corey, I think that's going to wrap it up for tonight. What you say?
I say that's a good place to stop.
Right there. Okay, folks. For Corey Groover, I'm Steve Fielder with the Gone to the Dogs podcast. We certainly have gone to the dogs many, many years ago, and looking forward to many, many more. Have a great week, folks.
See you, everybody.
I'll catch you next time. Good night.